Imagine a tense moment. You're in the middle of a heated discussion, your heart pounding in your chest, and your mind frantically searching for arguments, ready to burst from your lips like arrows. You feel an acute need to respond, defend your position, and prove you're right. But what if, at that very moment, when you're overflowing with the desire to react immediately, you're already defeated? The modern world has conditioned us to believe that strength lies in a loud voice, in the ability to argue persuasively, impose one's point of view, and always have a ready answer to any attack. However, there's another perspective. True strength lies not in outshouting your opponent or forcing them to accept your truth. Real power manifests in the ability to restrain yourself and choose silence. We live in an era of all-pervasive information noise, social media, endless debates, people competing in eloquence and striving to have the last word at all costs. But few realize that in this chaos of voices, true power belongs to those who don't succumb to the general frenzy. They observe, wait, and when they decide to speak, each of their words acquires the weight of a stone thrown into the calm surface of a lake. Nature has long revealed the truth that most people stubbornly ignore. An irrepressible desire to speak, answer, and justify oneself betrays a hidden weakness. Those who desperately crave to be heard are deep down seeking confirmation of their own importance. They don't control the situation, but only react to external stimuli, thereby becoming objects of manipulation. Conversely, those who have mastered the art of silence possess a different, deeper power that doesn't need anyone's approval or recognition. Think about the images of those individuals who have left an indelible mark on your life. Were they tireless talkers, or those whose few statements were etched in your memory like a precise strike? Skillfully applied silence creates an aura of mystery, inspires respect, and sometimes creates a sense of awkwardness. And discomfort, in turn, forces people to delve into reflection. Therefore, everyone should ask themselves, are you the master of your words, or are you still held captive by an unquenchable thirst to be heard? Do you possess the wisdom to recognize the moment when you should speak out and when it's better to allow silence to do its work? The truth is that silence is sometimes not just a conscious choice, but also a real challenge that few are capable of accepting. In this article, we'll explore how nature itself views the power of silence, and how this philosophy can transform your perception of the world and your positioning within it. By mastering this art, you'll forever change the impression you make on others. Look around at the modern world. It has never been so noisy. Every individual strives to express their opinion, yearns to be heard, and is convinced of the need to constantly say something. Social media has turned communication into a kind of public battle, where victory is achieved not through truth, but through the loudness of the voice and the endless repetition of the same theses. However, nature warns us, this manic passion for speaking, for immediate answers, and shouting one's position to the whole world is not a manifestation of strength, but merely a veiled weakness. Why has humanity throughout history experienced this unquenchable thirst for self-expression? The reason lies in deep-seated fears, the fear of losing one's significance, of dissolving into obscurity, the fear that silence will be perceived as a sign of agreement and submission. That's why people seek to fill every corner of the information space, spewing out streams of words in which they themselves sometimes don't fully believe, just to avoid the frightening prospect of being ignored. However, as N keenly realized, and which unfortunately many contemporaries fail to understand, true strength lies in the ability to wield silence. A person who has mastered the art of silence will never go unnoticed. On the contrary, they turn into a mystery, a figure that cannot be unambiguously defined or predicted. And unpredictability will always possess greater power than openness and straightforwardness. The world drowning in noise is an illusory trap. It creates the deceptive impression that those who are the loudest, who most persistently impose their opinion, who react the fastest to events, are the true victors. But this is the fate of the weak. And perceive life as a battlefield where the warrior who rushes into the attack first doesn't always win. Often, the triumphator is the one who knows how to wait, who carefully observes what is happening, who notices the opponent's weaknesses before striking. Look at the image of true strategists, whether in the fields of philosophy, military affairs, or entrepreneurship. They are laconic and cautious in their responses, avoiding exhaustion and fruitless attempts to prove anything to others. They realize that sometimes the most effective tactic is to let the opponent wear themselves out in futile efforts to decipher their intentions. And considered silence not as a manifestation of weakness, but as a demonstration of strength. Those who have mastered the art of silence gain control over the course of events. The ability to remain silent at the right moment forces others to speak more than they should, exposing their vulnerabilities and putting themselves on display. Modern society, in its depths, harbors a dislike for silence, as it encourages reflection, and reflection poses a threat to those whose identities are shaped by external noise. In this regard, it is worth asking yourself, do you control your voice, or are you just another lost element in the constant hum of the surrounding world? Do you possess the ability to determine when to speak and when to remain silent, or are you overcome with anxiety in the void of your own absence? After all, if you cannot bear silence, perhaps it is trying to convey something to you that you are afraid to hear. N held a deep conviction that humanity was mired in the shackles of self-deception, captive to false notions of morality, good and evil, of what is acceptable and reprehensible. From our earliest years, we are instructed to integrate into the system, to unquestioningly follow established norms, and to show reverence for accepted conventions. But what if we assume that these rules are created not to strengthen the spirit, but rather to subjugate the will? The idea of the Übermensch, the Superman by nature, is not about physical strength, financial well-being, or social status. It is about a much more powerful force, all-encompassing self-control. The Übermensch does not succumb to fleeting impulses, does not feel a desperate need for the approval of others, and does not feel the slightest need to prove anything to anyone. He creates his own system of values, establishes his own rules, and paves his own unique life path. And one of the main tools of this higher being is precisely the ability to remain silent. It is worth considering. What happens when a person remains silent in a situation where everyone around expects an answer from them? Silence creates a feeling of awkwardness, creates an atmosphere of mystery, and changes the balance of power. When a person refuses to react at the expected moment, they force their opponent to grapple with their own internal anxiety. N came to the conclusion that the common person experiences a panic fear of emptiness. They strive to fill everything around with words, explanations, and justifications. But the Übermensch realizes that silence can be a much more effective weapon than any, even the most convincing argument. Try to grasp the contrast between a genuine leader and someone who is forced to resort to shouting in order to be heard. A true leader does not need to strain their vocal cords or constantly justify themselves. They possess such inner strength and steadfastness that their presence alone inspires respect. Now turn your gaze to those who tirelessly talk about themselves, trying to convince others of their strength, intelligence, and superiority. Deep down, this endless verbal acrobatics is merely a manifestation of deeply hidden insecurity. N clearly recognized this dichotomy. The one who is overly verbose, who reacts to the slightest stimuli, who allows provocations to throw them off balance, is under the control of external forces. They are a slave to their own emotions, a prisoner of the assessments of others. But the one who possesses the art of silence, who weighs each word with surgical precision, who allows others to expend energy trying to decipher their intentions, is the true master of the situation. The Übermensch is not influenced by the opinions of others. He does not need the approval of those around him to establish his self-worth, and therefore does not waste himself on useless proofs. He realizes that his strength lies not in the number of words spoken, but in the silent yet tangible impact of his presence. Does a person control their words, or do words control them? Are they the rightful master of their voice, or do they act as a puppet, obediently heeding the opinions of others? Ultimately, those who possess true power never feel an acute need to be heard. Have you ever noticed the feeling of awkwardness that silence can evoke? It only takes a short pause in a conversation for someone to rush to fill it with words, any words, even a meaningless comment. Silence forms a vacuum, and man is disgusted by a vacuum. He needs to fill this space. He needs to feel that the situation is under control. Life reveals a harsh truth. Those who can control silence also control the minds of others. Silence is a psychological weapon. It disarms, confuses, and forces the other person to reveal themselves without requiring the slightest effort. When someone expects an answer but doesn't receive one, their mind descends into a state of uncertainty, desperately trying to understand what is happening. Are they being ignored out of contempt? Does their interlocutor possess knowledge they don't? Did they say too much without realizing it? The other person's mind becomes a labyrinth of doubts, while the mind of the one keeping silent remains undisturbed. Silence, as N realized, can serve as a kind of endurance test. Consider the outstanding strategists, the recognized masters of persuasion, and the leaders who have left an indelible mark on history. They never overuse speech, preferring to wait until their opponent exhausts themselves first. They allow their adversaries to speak incessantly until they expose their weaknesses and become entangled in their own statements. Silence is like a mirror, reflecting the interlocutor's inner insecurity, forcing them to confront themselves. Consider a typical discussion between two people. Who dominates it? The one who succumbs to excitement and tirelessly spews arguments, striving at all costs to convince the other, or the one who remains calm, observing what is happening, and allowing the opponent to waste their energy in vain? The former only reacts, allowing emotions to take over, while the latter is in complete control of the situation. By keeping silent, a person puts their interlocutor in a difficult position. The other person may interpret this silence in different ways, attributing disinterest, contempt, or even a sense of superiority. But the only thing they can be sure of is that they are not being manipulated, and that alone is enough to make them uncomfortable. En saw in silence a reflection of inner strength. The one who can withstand silence and does not feel the need to fill the void with meaningless words possesses true self-control. They don't need the approval of others, justifications, or proof of their own importance, and that is why they are perceived as a potential threat. Surely, everyone has at least once experienced the awkwardness caused by silence. Many have probably tried to interrupt a prolonged pause just to avoid the uncomfortable silence. And what is even more likely, everyone has at some point faced a situation where they were skillfully manipulated using the power of timely silence. After all, it's no secret that the one who masters the art of silence often controls the course of events. However, silence is not only a tool for influencing others, but also a serious test for oneself. The paradox is that most people experience a panic fear of silence. They fill the void with words not because they have something to say, but because of an irrational fear of silence. And realize that to achieve true strength, it is necessary to bravely face this discomfort. It is worth considering how many times one has felt obligated to explain, justify, and fill pauses with unnecessary words. Has it been noticed that in moments of silence, those around begin to show anxiety, interpreting silence as a manifestation of arrogance, disinterest, or even as an act of aggression? This is because modern society accustoms people to constantly seeking approval. Silence becomes a refusal to participate in this game, which in turn causes discomfort to those around. And viewed silence as a form of rebellion. A person who keeps silent in the chaos of information noise declares without a word, "I'm not participating in this game. I do not need to meet someone else's expectations." This frightens those around, as they are at a loss as to how to react to someone who does not panic in an effort to be understood, who does not conform to accepted behavioral patterns. After all, at heart, the desire for understanding is a kind of dependence. Those who desperately need understanding are subconsciously asking for permission to exist. However, Superman does not need anyone's permission. They create their own values, independent of the recognition of others. This requires courage, which is available to few, because enduring silence means bearing the heavy burden of loneliness, recognizing that often no one shares your choices. Let us recall the great thinkers, visionaries, and revolutionaries of the past. Their innovative ideas did not find immediate recognition, were subjected to ridicule, ignored, and met with fierce resistance. However, they did not need to raise their voices to be heard. They steadfastly endured the silence of misunderstanding and rejection, continuing on their path. For truth does not need approving exclamations to remain truth. Let's consider personal experience. How often have you felt the urge to explain your decisions, prove you're right, or seek approval from others? And how often have these efforts led to real change? Wasn't the desire to explain merely a reflection of an inner fear of being rejected? N urges us to overcome this fear by asking, do you speak because you truly have something to say, or are you driven by a fear of silence? Do you need universal support, or are you strong enough to move forward without it? For those who fear silence will never find true freedom. Silence is not simply a pause in the flow of speech, but a powerful tool of influence, a carefully calibrated strategy, and a unique game of dominance. However, like any weapon, the effectiveness of silence depends directly on the appropriateness of its application. N did not call for a complete rejection of communication. His position was that words should only be spoken when truly necessary. Think back to all your conversations in the past month. How much of it was filled with real meaning? How many of them turned into a waste of time? How often have you found yourself in situations where you had to justify yourself, respond to provocative attacks, or try to convince someone whose opinion will remain unchanged? How many words were spoken in vain, just to fill an awkward silence? N regarded such behavior as a manifestation of psychological dependence. People constantly engaged in conversations are in a state of continuous reaction to the world around them, striving to justify their existence. Conversely, those who speak thoughtfully by their own volition, weighing each word, possess true power and command genuine respect. History knows many examples of outstanding strategists whose mastery lay not only in their ability to lead troops or develop brilliant plans, but also in the art of wielding words in silence. They never allowed themselves excess, clearly understanding when to retreat into the shadows, wait for the right moment, and when to remain silent, allowing others to reveal themselves. And when such leaders did find it necessary to speak, their words acquired special significance, because each of them was carefully considered, thought out, and carried immense weight. Unfortunately, many people tend to speak without thinking about the consequences, reacting impulsively to events and falling into the trap of provocations, striving at all costs to insist on their point of view. They do not realize that such behavior makes them predictable and vulnerable. N, on the contrary, understood that unpredictability is a powerful weapon. A person whose actions cannot be predicted becomes an enigma to others. And an enigma, as is known, always possesses more power than an open book. But how to learn to apply this philosophy in practice? How to use silence as a strategic tool? First of all, it is necessary to develop the habit of observing before reacting. Most people, without fully understanding the meaning of what was said, immediately seek to express their opinion, make an amendment, or enter into a dispute. However, one who has mastered the art of silence knows how to wait. He carefully observes what is happening, analyzes the situation, and only then decides whether to respond at all. Secondly, you should ask yourself about the necessity of personal participation in a specific conversation. Not every exchange of opinions deserves attention. Often, discussions turn into empty competitions of egos, into senseless verbal battles, where no one is interested in the truth. If the conversation does not bring any benefit, if the interlocutor is deaf to arguments, then is it worth spending your energy on it? As N would say, let them talk without us. Thirdly, when it is decided to speak out, every word should be worth its weight in gold. The habit of speaking little leads to the fact that every word spoken attracts attention. Your statements acquire a significance unavailable to those who speak constantly. There is no need to convince everyone and anyone. It is enough to speak so that every word has meaning. Ultimately, it is not the frequency of speeches that matters, but the effect produced. The question arises, who controls the words? You, or do they control you? Is a choice made when to speak, or does a person simply react automatically, obeying the need to express oneself? N teaches that those who speak little but to the point are always listened to. One who has mastered the art of silence will never become a slave to verbal noise. Ultimately, it all comes down to one thing. Who controls silence? You, or does it control you? In N's view, existence was presented as an arena for the clash of various forces. In this dynamic game, those who are deprived of power are often excessively verbose, striving to find excuses for their actions or convince others of their correctness. At the same time, those who possess true power do not need constant approval from others. They realize that a continuous stream of words is often just a manifestation of inner insecurity and instability. They understand that silence can be much more expressive and meaningful than the most eloquent speeches. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is a mirror reflecting the true essence of a person. When an individual chooses silence, they offer the world the opportunity to see them without any distorting factors, revealing their authentic nature. And for many, this becomes an unbearable test. The reason lies in the fact that most people form their personality based on the reactions of others. But what happens if they are deprived of this familiar support? What if we don't give the expected response, don't conform to preconceived notions? Who does a person become when they are stripped of the need for constant validation of their importance? N was convinced that only a few are ready for such a revelation. Only a handful are capable of withstanding the weight of their own silence. However, those who find the courage to look into this abyss, who master the art of silence, become unshakable and invulnerable. They no longer need to waste energy on explanations and justifications, because it doesn't matter what others say about them, what thoughts swirl in other people's heads. They gain inner freedom that allows them to remain true to themselves, no matter what. In situations where he is expected to speak, but he prefers to remain silent, the logical question arises about the consequences of such a decision. This behavior does not go unnoticed and has a certain impact on those around him. The invitation to share your thoughts on such situations and their impact serves as an incentive for reflection and self-analysis. If this idea sparks interest and makes you think, then it is suggested not to stop there. As a next step, it is suggested to watch a video that is claimed to allow you to delve deeper into this topic. Regardless of the initial attitude, the viewer is encouraged to watch this video, implying that it contains important and useful information.